So what are you guys doing this weekend? You seeing any movies or anything? You know, Thor opens tonight, and since one of the leading ladies is Natalie Portman, it's safe to say I'll be in the theater ogling her breathtaking acting skills. Oh, not that watching Natalie would be, but it looks like my money won't be wasted either. Thor is getting mostly decent reviews, and in fact, some of that surprising decentness is rubbing off on the video game version as well. Developed by the same studio that gave us Contra 4, Thor is actually legitimately good on the Nintendo DS. And on the Wii, well, Thor is legitimately good on the Nintendo DS.
Mere ice is no match for Mjolnir's might.
Unfortunately, this is not the DS game. We'll be reviewing that next week. This is Thor, God of Thunder for the Nintendo Wii, a game that carries a much weaker hammer than its handheld counterpart. Unlike the DS game, the Wii version was developed by a great team. Redfly Studios has done some pretty sweet Wii games, including Ghostbusters the video game, Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2, and the quirky, ooey gooey platformer Mushroom Men. And the one thing all those games have in common is the unique approach Redfly takes to even the most conventional ideas. Now, maybe their hands were just tied a little more than usual with Thor, but unfortunately, there's nothing unique about this one. So, Thor, God of Thunder is a beat-em-up with, again, a very similar style. Playing as the hot-headed son of Odin, you control Thor through lots of linear levels of repetitive button mashing. For basic attacks, you hammer the A button, as always, pun intended. Tilting the analog stick directs your immortal fury, and by mixing buttons with various remote swings, you can actually pull off some pretty brutal combinations. It's a really basic system, but it's also intuitive and fun to experiment with, especially with the way the counter increases. The more consecutive hits you string together, the more powerful the attacks Thor can unleash, so you're given incentive to maximize your hit counter. Unfortunately, the problem is you don't really need those powerful attacks. Simply mashing the A button is more than enough to get you through most of the game, because Thor doesn't seem to have worthy foes. The levels are basically just repetitive patterns of long hallways filled with hapless enemies, and playing through them gets really stale really fast. There just isn't much variety or inspiration in these level designs at all. But you know, the game does do a lot right. Its excellent boss battles mix up cinematic QuickTime events and even different gameplay elements very well. And speaking of different gameplay, the Wii version of Thor has some flight-based levels exclusive to Nintendo's platform. And they kind of play like leftovers from a Sin and Punishment game, albeit a lot less difficult and a lot less good, but they still go a long way in breaking up this otherwise repetitive brawler. This isn't a bad game, it's just very generic. In fact, you sometimes forget which god you're supposed to be playing as. It feels very God of War, and although that's not entirely a bad thing. It also mixes up the gameplay pretty well, but ultimately, dull level design and technically poor graphics keep Thor from reaching the same heights on Wii as he does on the DS.